Tonight, I want to tell you about just one aspect of Project 2025. It's planned to turn Donald Trump into a dictator.
At the DNC, Democrats have taken the opportunity to lie about the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, characterizing the document as an authoritarian blueprint for a dystopian future. Here to discuss is Ryan Walker, Executive Vice President for Heritage Action for America. So, Ryan, is Project 2025 actually going to make Trump the dictator that they claim he will become?
No, of course not. This is an attempt by the DNC and Kamala Harris to create a boogeyman, to use fear and that concept to convince the American people that this agenda, which they're lying about, will somehow negatively impact their lives. But this is all because Biden and now Harris have no record that they can stand on and present to the American people that's widely accepted or agreed to. They have no policies. They cannot say, let's continue the things that we have been doing for the past 4 years. It will only get better. So they have created a boogeyman to instill fear in the American people.
So one question for you is, one of the ways that they were able to make this boogeyman is because of all the press that Project 2025 was getting. The interviews that were done, it was much more upfront than Heritage's usual efforts on this front, which you've been doing for decades, essentially, with Republican administrations. Was that maybe a miscalculation to be so upfront and to talk about this so publicly as to end up kind of in a brouhaha with the campaign itself?
Well, listen, I think the Harris campaign has spent millions of dollars online and in the public promoting the lies about the policies that are contained within Project 2025 to create this boogeyman. Sure, you could point to media appearances and all of that, but I don't think without the campaign's engagement and their continued lies about what's actually in the mandate for leadership that this would be an issue at all.
So, Ryan, is this still an ongoing media campaign? You guys are out kind of punching back, right, against the left, and that's something you intend to continue to do.
Well, that's right. And we've seen the legacy media outlets like the AP, Washington Post, and others. CNN is included in that. Dozens of fact checks now have gone out and been issued. They've had to issue retractions or corrections to their stories. In fact, the AP just deleted a tweet because it was highly inaccurate. And we at the Heritage Foundation were able to push back and tell them the truth about what's actually in the mandate. So I think they'll continue to fearmonger because, again, they have no platform to communicate to the American people that's widely accepted. Kamala Harris has taken the tact of stealing ideas from Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and the no tax on tips and an increase in the child tax credit. And unfortunately, she's stolen the idea of capping food prices from Joseph Stalin, which is not widely accepted amongst the American people. So that's what's happening now. They're trying to create fear amongst the American people, which is a theme that Barack Obama last night spoke about on stage, about how Donald Trump and Republicans across the country were supposedly using fear to try and win the election. I would say that the Democrats and the Democratic Party, they're the ones instilling fear and creating the boogeyman that is Project 25.
Ryan, when I was scrolling around on X, I came across a post from Joel Berry. He's the managing editor of the Babylon Bee, and he said, "So I decided to finally check out Project 2025, and it seems to be a comprehensive plan to shutter federal agencies, fire thousands of government bureaucrats, and give back power to the American people. Sounds good to me," right? And when you look at it, they go through and the leftists try and say, oh, all of these things are so terrible. But when you dig into it and you just say, wait a minute, this is what it's actually going to do. Do you find that people, when they actually do dig into it and look at it a little bit further, have a different mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, you mentioned this previously. We've been doing this at the Heritage Foundation since the 80s. This is a lot of the information and policy solutions contained within that document are traditional Republican policy solutions. And I, as an anecdote, I heard from a focus group, a constituent or a voter in the state of Michigan, get on and say that she was worried about implementation of Project 25. And they asked her specifically, what policies do you oppose? And she mentioned that she doesn't like the Schedule F changes to the federal workforce, but then immediately pivoted to, well, there were actually solutions in the document that I actually agreed with, like the suggestions on budgeting. And she mentioned how she didn't think that the United States government was adequately budgeting for our fiscal needs, and said that she adhered or agreed to the suggestions contained within there. So again, I think that this is a misinformation campaign, and Kamala Harris and the Democrats have spent millions of dollars to make it so. And as more information comes out and the actual solutions that are contained within Mandate for Leadership are publicized or made more aware to the American people, I think that they largely fall into the camp of either neutral or they actually end up supporting it.
There was a lot of people looking back after 2020 saying that despite all the accomplishments of the first 4 years of a Trump administration, there are so many different traps they fell into, so many times that they were pulled back by the federal government, so many small little betrayals from the career workforce, so many different places that they got mired where maybe a more experienced administration wouldn't have. And there's a lot of hopes about trying to change that. But over these next 4 years, of course, Joe Biden has been essentially booby-trapping the federal government from being able to change, making it more difficult to fire civil servants, trying to lock the United States into some of the global warming treaties. How confident are you that you'll actually be able to not just peel that back, the last 4 years or so of damage to the country, but actually go out of the way in a deeper way that even Ronald Reagan wasn't able to do, to make it so the federal government can't just simply re-encroach next time a Democrat wins?
Listen, I think for the last 4 years, members of the previous administration, Donald Trump's administration, and others, experts and allies of the Republican Party, have been thinking about just that. I think they've been preparing, they've been putting things in writing so that they have a plan for not just the first 180 days, but for the entirety of the 4 years of the second term. And so I think that a lot of folks will come back into the fold, go back into the administration with 4 years of incredible experience. They will know all of the various angles that they need to address and things to look out for, and importantly, plan for in those waning years as they are looking toward the exits. I think that they've been educated, right? They've gone through this now. They've been a part of the federal government in a substantial way, and I think that they'll know the trappings, if you will, of what this administration is putting in place to try and trip them up.
Ryan, first, just a word about the disinformation. I mean, I do think we should take a step back and just acknowledge for the audience, the misinformation here is hilarious. I mean, it actually, if you take a step back, I mean, it's so serious, games we play in media, but what they're saying is legit funny. I mean, if you're going to be a dictator, you could probably wouldn't put out the plan, with your Washington think tank. Here's my step-by-step plan to become Mussolini or Hitler. I mean, the whole thing is sort of hilarious. But more seriously, looking forward, there's obviously been some awkwardness about this on the right. And I'm curious if there's any progress or inroads to quelling some of this misinformation and its effect on the right and with the campaign.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I think that we have certainly pushed back on these major media outlets. We don't let a commentary go unsaid these days without proving the facts and circumstances of the case, pointing them to the written document that contains all of this information, and course correcting and fact checking what they're putting out. I mentioned the AP has become basically an outlet for the left. They've had to delete tweets. The Washington Post has had to correct stories. CNN has had to come out publicly and say that they were wrong about the information that they had put out. So, yeah, I think there's absolutely a course correction here. And I think you've seen that over the past few weeks, somewhat setting the convention aside. Some of that noise has died down. So I think that we are getting there and, we're ready for November.